All right, guys. So I guess I'll try to briefly cover what's going on here. My previous video, at least I think it was my last one, was entitled Dark Matter 2525, but Intelligent People Believe in God. Essentially, it covered that why intelligent people believe in God, and essentially it basically drew out through a whole lot of logic that essentially it's indoctrination that causes that. It's the explanation that he gives, and I believe he's correct. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that he's correct. So, as usual, theists will tend to want to defend themselves. It's kind of what they do. So, uh, when it comes like religion tends to be one of the biggest sources of identity for people, which I find to be very problematic, but it that's how it works. So, because it's such an important part of your identity, your brain automatically engages in mental gymnastics to defend itself because it literally considers it part of you. This is basic psychology. But so let's just suffice it to say a person was offended, or at least, at the very least, they took an issue with the way it was laid out. So I will read it now, or at least the specific post that I'm addressing, because this isn't about the individual, because I generally don't deal with individuals except for in very rare circumstances. The only reason I'm addressing this is because it's such a common misconception and like fallacious way of thinking, and it just can't be true in the big picture. So I feel like it's something that should be addressed. Anyhow, let's get into it. This is like childish nonsense stuff. The vast majority of religious people or people of faith in the Western world today do so out of choice. They choose in capital letters, to have faith in pursuit of virtue. And how is the irony of that video so lost on you, T Robs? This is the so I'll continue, but so those first 2 sentences are really the meat of this that I'm gonna be addressing. This next part is like the snarky, butthurt insecurity that always occurs when right-wingers read my shit, or religious people in this particular instance, which oftentimes tend to be the same, but not always. But they'll they'll tend to try to make a point. They'll make one point. There's usually a fallacy involved, or several fallacies in many cases, but then they will end it with like an ad hominem or an attempt to like attack me because they're butthurt because I hurt their feelings, which is really telling. But anyway, and how is the irony of that video so lost on you, T Robs? It's literally the same mechanism that compels you to parrot others. Yet there's no example of me parroting others. And even if there would be an example of parroting others, that's absolutely irrelevant, because all that matters is whether or not what I claim is true. Whether the only reason why it would matter if it came directly from me and only me is if I'm running some sort of contest and I want to prove to people that I'm a genius or some shit, which is not my goal. My goal is to spread truth. And if I can find information from another source that can lay it out in a better way than I can, it's only logical for me to do so, right? Like, any other way of thinking is just emotional and really stupid, to be honest. But anyway, so let's deal with this. The vast majority of religion. So this is extra problematic, because if the statement was, I have faith, or I believe or have faith in God due to personal choice, it would still be wrong, most likely wrong, but at least it wouldn't be as problematic, because then it's just making a claim about themselves. And it's a whole lot more difficult to disprove a claim about one individual, right? I mean, I shouldn't need to explain that. But making the claim the vast majority of religious people or people of faith in the Western world today do so out of choice, this is easily debunked. And like, obviously, because you're making a far more grander claim. So, one, and actually, I laid this out in the comments and I asked for any sort of evidence of this, and then said that uh, for this particular person, they've had a history of not providing, like, okay, let me go back. I said something to the effect of, where is your evidence? And I hope it isn't just personal observation, because based on your history, you're not a very reliable source of information. Yeah, it's something like that. And then there was nothing. He kept on by like attacking, which is his general go-to. This tends to be right-wingers in general, but beside the point. Um, yeah, there was never actually any valid logical points at all. It was just this claim, and then I guess he expects that I'm just going to take it at face value and just trust him that he knows what he's talking about. So, as I was saying, if his claim was just about him, even then, you can't just take it at face value, because if you were indoctrinated, pretty much by definition, you wouldn't be aware of your indoctrination. You would think that what you believe is true, right? That's how it works. So, being that this is a person that is religious, he's already biased. He can't really like like you can't take him seriously, not just based on his word. You need some sort of measurable external evidence outside of his own head, right? This is very common sense. So again, that would already be like a silly statement, but this is extra, this is delusional. The vast majority of religious people or people of faith in the Western world today do so out of choice. All right, now I said I was at work at the time. I said, wait until I get home and I can debunk or prove that you're wrong, um, something like that, with just one infographic. So I'm going to have to tweak that a little bit. I can't do it with one infographic. I thought that there was one that showed everything that I wanted to encapsulate just in one, but that's not true. But I can still prove it false. So I can't trust, I'm sure many of you do, but I can't trust that everyone understands. So we're going to do something called inductive reasoning. I'm not going to dig into everything, pull up definitions and all that, but if you absolutely need it, you can easily look it up. It's not a very complicated thing, but that's what we're going to use here. So I specifically chose, hold on, let me swap over and present my screen. Damn, I almost put you guys on Chatterbait. I would have got my shit shut down. There we go. All right. I chose Pew Research because it's the most trusted fucking research center in the world. It's like the most unbiased, legitimate research center there is, like bar none. I can't think of anything else that's considered more legitimate anyway, if there is. But anyway, the point is, this is not fucking like liberal propaganda or any shit like that. Like, that would be a stupid statement. So, okay, this is entitled The Global Religious Landscape. And so before we get going, let's do a little thought experiment here. If religious belief were primarily, damn, I can't fucking get my words proper here. If religious belief was arrived at primarily by choice, what would you expect the world to look like in terms of religious diversity? The flip side to that, if people's religious belief was primarily indoctrination and not actually their own choice, of course they'll think it's their choice, but if it were religious indoctrination, what would the world look like? The religious landscape, so to speak. Now, I don't think I should have to go too very far in making this point because it's it's like obvious, very obvious. If people came to their religious beliefs due to personal choice, that it would be about logic, really. It would be about weighing the pros and the cons of each religion, I guess. So, what you would expect to see if you were to detail a map that broke down the entire world and then like showed you their religious majority, what you would expect is a couple of religions would like dominate no matter what in all locations, right? Like you would see like roughly like a let's say and then in North America it would be like 75% Christian, and then like in parts of Europe, it would be like still 75% Christian. And then, like, this is just a random shit I'm throwing out to make this point, by the way. It's not actually based on anything. But the point is, it would be relatively the same because it's based on logic, it's based on your complex analysis of each specific religion that you come in contact with. Because remember, if the whole point is to show that you came to here by choice, it means you come there from a like a blank slate. Another, because you don't know is your default, right? So what you do is you start learning about religions, and like I shouldn't need to explain that, especially in this day and age, it's 2025, but for a long time now, since the mid 90s at least, we have had all of this information at our fingertips, at least a vast majority of people around the world. So my point is, it would be roughly the same numbers no matter where you went, because access to uh, the knowledge of these different religions, at least at the very least, like the top 4 or 5, is not dependent on your location. You can get it anywhere, right? Like that's obvious as fuck. So what you would see in the reverse, as I kind of started with, I kind of went all over the place, but still, what you would see if it were primarily indoctrination is that you would notice that certain regions would dominate their respective religion. It would be like majority here, and then like a tiny minority of people, and then like in the other part of the world, which had a bunch of people that have the same culture, customs, etc., they would have a different one, and it would be completely different than this other location, right? All right. So I believe I made my point there, hopefully. So we're going to take a moment to get to it, but I'll just cover some of this while I'm doing that. Here's the complete size of major religious groups, at least in 2010. I doubt this has changed drastically because world religions are literally like thousands of years old. Yeah, it's not going to be a massive difference in just like a couple of decades or a decade and a half. Not going to happen. So we've got folk religions at 5.9%, Buddhists at 7.1%, Hindus at 15%, 16.3% unaffiliated, 23.2% Muslim, 31.5% Christians, 0.2% Jews, and 0.8% other religions. Geographic distribution. Hold on, my cat's driving me crazy and messing with my brain while I'm trying to understand this. So it's starting with just the colors, at least, are based on locations, not religions, which is sort of what I was expecting, which is confusing. All right. It doesn't even really matter because it's not the point that I'm making here. Now, this is more the point that I'm making. So, majority or minority? 97% of Hindus live as a majority. Now, what that would entail, if I'm right and my whole proposal is correct, which it more than likely is based on the evidence, that would mean that Hindus, in comparison to other locations, are more indoctrinated because they have a higher percentage of belief, when that wouldn't happen if it was all just about like your personal like logic, because it's not like Hindus don't have access to Christianity or Islam, not in this day and age. So now we have Christians, 87% majority, Muslims, 73% majority, unaffiliated, 71% majority, Jews, 41%. Now, Jews are a weird one because they're such a tiny part of the population, so we couldn't really draw much from it. Buddhists are interesting because it's 28% as a majority, which means they're a minority pretty much everywhere. So they're sort of an outlier, but at the very least, from here to here is my point. So let's read this. Nearly 3/4 of the world's people live in countries in which their religious group makes up a majority of the population. Only about a quarter of all people live as religious minorities. This figure does not include subgroups of the 8 major groups in the study, such as Shia Muslims living in Sunni majority countries or Catholics living in Protestant majority countries. Overwhelmingly, Hindus and Christians tend to live in countries where they are in the majority. Fully 97% of all Hindus live in the world's 3 Hindu majority countries: India, Mauritius, and Nepal, and nearly 9 in 10 Christians, 87%, are found in the world's 157 Christian majority countries. To see the religious composition of each country, see religious composition by country table. Though by smaller margins, most Muslims, 73%, and religiously unaffiliated people, 71%, also live in countries in which they are the predominant religious group. Muslims are a majority in 49 countries, including 19 of the 20 countries in the Middle East and North Africa. The religiously unaffiliated make up a majority of the population in 6 countries, of which China is by far the largest. The others are the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hong Kong, Japan, and North Korea. Most members of the other major religious groups live in countries in which they are in the minority. 7 in 10 Buddhists, for example, live as religious minorities. Just 3 in 10 live in the 7 countries where Buddhists are in the majority: Bhutan, Burma, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Mongolia, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. Now, this one is huge for my point. You notice the not only that, so this isn't the whole point. This is why I had to actually cover most of this, but it still makes my point, and there's really no way out of it, no logical way out of it. I would like to see someone try. So this is showing the no, actually, it does make my point because how do I put it? It has a darker shade if it's a higher percentage. At least it seems to be. Darker shading represent greater prevalence of the. Yes, exactly. So actually, sorry, I could have just shown this and it would have made my whole point. I'd misunderstood. I thought that it didn't have the percentage and the majority religion, but it does. So anyhow, Christians are red. And you'll notice that there's like little areas to where there's and this could be explained just by like more freedom of religion, for example, or more relaxed culture, that sort of thing. But you'll notice that there are always pockets of religious belief. And then you'll have like a whole area where it's almost like, for instance, this entire area is almost all Muslims because they're all together. They all share the same customs, the same societal influence, the same institutions, which push the same shit. There's very few places that have no clear majority. So of course we've got Hindus here, exactly as you'd expect. Buddhists here. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I think that's Buddhist because Hindus are so close. They should have used different colors with those two specifically, in my opinion, because they tend to be in around the same regions. But either way, not that important for my overall point. But like this here, like without a doubt, unless you have another way of explaining it, which even if you do, it will be a far less, it'll be a less explanatory explanation. It will be a shitty excuse, really. This shows that it's not just personal choice. Otherwise, like I said, you would see roughly the same percentage of belief of religions in different areas, regardless of location. So, as I said before, it would be like you would go to Russia and it would be like whatever, like 70% or let's say like 60% Christianity and then like 30-40% Islam, just as a random, like shooting off my ass just to make a point here. And then it would be roughly the same with very little differentiation no matter where you went in the world. That's not what we see. We see pockets of influence. And what that tells us is that people in big picture, not individual, but big picture, when people say, and everyone that's religious thinks they came to their decision by choice, except for the few that admit that they're like cultural Christians or cultural Muslims that don't really practice. They just kind of share some of the cultural values and they don't take it that seriously. But my point is, any of the like serious dogmatic religious people will tell you that they came to their belief through personal choice. This is not true because if that were, you wouldn't see this map right here. It wouldn't look like this. This shows without a doubt that it's indoctrination, that your family members, customs, holidays, all of that, especially like throughout the generations in those countries that lead to your beliefs, which shows it's not about proof. It's not about evidence. You're led to believe it through indoctrination, which to me is like morally abhorrent, especially children. But anyway, I've made my point. Feel free to, well, I will leave this entire deal. There's a whole lot more to it than that in a link in the description. Feel free to clap back if you're a theist, but do your best not to engage in ad hominems because it's just really boring. You're not going to offend me. You just make me feel sorry for you being an idiot. Thank you for your time.